I didn't see this coming, honestly, no one did. When Kody started talking about what really went down between Robyn and Janelle, it wasn't just another tense moment on Sister Wives. It was like the truth finally slipping out after years of pretending. You could see it in his face, the way he shifted in that chair, how his voice cracked just enough to sound like a human being again. Robyn wasn't innocent in this, he said. She knew what she was doing. That one line changed everything. For years, viewers believed Robyn was just the quiet one, the woman caught between Kody's anger and the frustration of the other wives. But what if that quiet was something else? What if it was a strategy? Hey, besties, welcome back to Reality Recap. You remember last year when I broke down the tangled money story behind Coyote Pass? Yeah, the same one everybody said was too complicated or old news. Well, that mess wasn't over, and now it is blowing up in a way none of them can hide from. Let's rewind for a second. When Robyn and Kody bought their home, fans were told they were pooling family money. It sounded harmless, right? Just a big family chipping in for a dream. But now Kody's hinting that Robyn pushed harder than anyone knew, that she convinced him to use Janelle's funds because it would all balance out later, never came. And that is what this story is really about. Not just money, not just property. It is about manipulation dressed as unity and how one decision pulled apart everything they said they stood for. Now, before we go deeper, quick reminder, I used to work in real estate finance. I know how this stuff looks on paper and what actually happens behind the paperwork, and from what I am seeing, none of this adds up. When Kody finally admitted Robyn had a say in where that money went, my jaw hit the floor. Because that changes the whole narrative. If Robyn knew those funds weren't hers to use, that means this wasn't just poor communication, it was a calculated move. One that left Janelle exposed. And here's the kicker. Kody's confession doesn't sound like he's protecting Robyn anymore. It sounds like he's protecting himself. So today, we're going to break down exactly what Kody revealed, how it ties back to the original gift money, and why Janelle might have been the only one telling the truth all along. Because what you're about to hear could change how fans see Robyn forever. When Kody said Robyn knew exactly what she was doing, it stopped feeling like gossip and started sounding like a confession. You could almost sense that this was the part of the story no one wanted to say out loud. He didn't shout. He said it the way people talk when they're tired of keeping a secret. She told me Janelle wouldn't mind, Kody said quietly, that it was all family money anyway. That phrase, family money, has been used so many times over the years. It's almost lost meaning. Every time someone brought up the house, Robyn said the same thing. It's family money. She said it during interviews, on camera, even in conversations where you could tell Janelle was uncomfortable. But what Kody just exposed shifts that. Because if Robyn framed it that way from the start, she didn't just take money, she reframed ownership. Let's pause here. When families share finances, especially in plural marriages, everything gets tangled. But family money isn't a legal term. The bank doesn't care who calls what family. They look at whose name is on the mortgage, whose credit, whose deposits. If those deposits came from Janelle's home sale, and it was listed as a gift, it's locked. She can't claim it later. Robyn knew that. Kody knew that. Janelle, trusting them both, probably didn't realize what that would mean down the road, and this is where things start to twist. In the new episode, Janelle talks about wanting closure, selling Coyote Pass, cutting the last ties, finally being free. But even while she talks about freedom, her tone carries something else, resignation, like she has finally accepted that she'll never see that money again. That is when Kody jumps in. He starts explaining how debts were settled, and that everything's fair now. But notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't mention repayment, receipts, or timing. He doesn't even look her in the eye. This isn't bad bookkeeping. This is a story about control disguised as fairness, and Robyn, she is nowhere in that scene. Not in the room, not on the call. She tells producers later that being part of the conversation is too toxic. Toxic. That word again, the shield. It has become Robyn's all-purpose defense. Toxic means, I don't have to answer. Toxic means, you are being unfair to me, but here is the problem. Avoiding the conversation doesn't erase the truth. Kody may have finally cracked under pressure, but the way he phrased it, that Robyn knew. That is what changes everything. Because that means she wasn't just pulled into the mess, she helped design it, and in a family that built itself on the idea of shared faith and trust. That kind of betrayal doesn't go away easily. Janelle used to say she could separate emotions from money. She handled the family books for years, tracked every bill, every shared expense. She believed she could be objective. That logic would keep her safe. But logic doesn't stand a chance against trust that has been used like currency. When Kody finally started hinting that Robyn was the one who insisted on using Janelle's funds, you could almost feel Janelle's restraint cracking. Not because she was surprised, she already knew. But hearing Kody admit it meant he'd finally stopped pretending. "I told her I didn't want to use Janelle's proceeds," Kody said, "but Robyn said it was fine. She said we'd make it right later." Never came. Here is the thing about that moment. Kody wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He sounded relieved, like admitting Robyn's role was somehow setting him free, even if it threw her under the bus. And that is when you realize something deeper. This isn't just about who paid what, it's about who had power when it mattered most. Because at that point, Janelle wasn't just a wife in a plural family. She was the one still believing the group could work. She was the one financing the illusion. While Robyn was quietly building her own version of the family. One centered around her home, her rules, and her name on the deed. And it worked. By the time the mortgage was finalized, Robyn and Kody had what they wanted: stability, a legal marriage, and control. The rest, loose ends. Janelle became one of those loose ends. The episode cuts between Kody's justification and old clips. Moments of Robyn insisting that everything was fair, that the money belonged to all of us. It's haunting to watch those now, knowing what came later. And you can tell the producers know it too. They linger on her words just long enough for viewers to catch the irony. Because now, with Kody finally acknowledging Robyn's involvement, that fairness starts to look more like manipulation. Robyn said she didn't like conflict, but what she really didn't like was accountability, and when the pressure finally reached a point where Kody couldn't hold it in anymore, he didn't protect her. He exposed her. It's the beginning of a fracture that's been years in the making, one where every choice, every family decision is starting to look like a setup. And the more Kody talks, the more it sounds like he's rewriting the story to save himself. When Robyn first started saying she didn't want to be around the other wives because it was too toxic, most people took it at face value. They thought she was just tired of the arguing, maybe trying to protect her peace. But when you line up the timeline with the money issues, that phrase starts to sound more like strategy than self-care. Avoidance became her power move. Each time something uncomfortable came up. The Coyote Pass delays, the house payments, Janelle's missing equity, Robyn was conveniently unavailable. She didn't show up for the calls. She bowed out of the group talks. She left Kody to handle it, and by removing herself, she stayed clean. She could keep her image soft while the others looked angry and emotional. "I just can't handle all that negativity," she told the cameras once. But negativity is what happens when truth gets ignored. Here is the pattern. Robyn steps back, Kody steps forward, and suddenly every uncomfortable question gets redirected. "Robyn's sensitive," he says. "She doesn't deserve this. It is a subtle trick. Make her look fragile, and anyone who challenges her looks cruel. That is how you hold control without raising your voice." Meanwhile, Janelle's left doing what she has always done, managing logistics, trying to get signatures, calling realtors, trying to sell land that is technically hers but controlled by Kody's decisions. Every delay costs her money, and every delay gives Robyn more distance from responsibility. You start to see the difference between conflict avoidance and accountability avoidance. One comes from peacekeeping, the other comes from self-preservation. And Kody, he feeds into it. Because Robyn's fear narrative protects him too. If she is unsafe, then he gets to be her protector. And if he is her protector, he doesn't have to answer for what went wrong with Janelle. It is a cycle that works for both of them. Until the truth starts leaking out. That is what makes his latest comments so fascinating. For the first time, Kody seems frustrated with Robyn's silence. Like he finally realizes that her avoidance doesn't just shield her, it exposes him. Because the moment he admits she knew what she was doing, he is admitting she wasn't a passive victim in any of this. And once that line is crossed, the whole story changes. Robyn's role goes from hurt wife to active participant. That is where the unraveling begins. The moment avoidance stops being protection and starts being evidence. Every season of Sister Wives has a moment when Kody starts losing control of the story. This time, it wasn't an argument or a headline. It was the timeline itself. The numbers stopped adding up, but when the paperwork and interviews started to overlap, small cracks turned into gaps you could drive a truck through. Viewers started asking the same question: if everything was shared, why did only one household end up secure? That is when Kody's explanations started to wobble. One scene, he blames the market, the next, communication issues. He looks more like a man trying to patch a story than explain a plan. Robyn keeps quiet through most of it, her familiar calm face, the practiced patience. But there are times when silence can be loud. Every unanswered question pushes the spotlight back toward her. Meanwhile, Janelle's scenes have a different energy. She is practical, grounded, talking about budgets and land values, but beneath, you can hear exhaustion. Years of carrying the family vision, while others built individual comfort. The show is editors know what they are doing. They cut between Kody's confident words and quick shots of paperwork, old clips of promises made in dusty Coyote Pass fields. It is not gossip, it is contrast. The audience can fill in the blanks. And that is where the narrative slips out of Kody's hands. Because once the timeline becomes public, the story belongs to whoever tells it best. For years, that was Kody. Now it is the viewers, and they're starting to connect dots. He never expected anyone to see. By the time those episodes aired, something had shifted outside the show. Viewers weren't just watching drama anymore, they were fact-checking it. Clips from old seasons started popping up everywhere. Kody promising equal ownership, Robyn referring to the new house as a family investment, Janelle talking about her down payment like it was temporary. People started stitching those clips together and drawing their own conclusions. And once a reality television audience starts doing that, its narrative stops belonging to its cast. Kody could still talk about unity, but viewers had already seen years of imbalance. They'd watched the rotation schedule fall apart, the shared finances dissolve, and the energy between the wives turn from cooperation into quiet calculation. They weren't guessing anymore, they were tracking patterns. Janelle, who used to be the voice of reason, suddenly became the every woman of the series, calm, frustrated, and practical. You can tell she's hit her limit. She wasn't shouting or crying, she was done explaining. "I'm tired of waiting," she said in one confessional. "I've built this dream long enough." That line hit harder than anything dramatic did. It sounded like the end of a contract the viewers had watched her sign in hope years ago. Meanwhile, Robyn's scenes felt different, the same gentle tone, the same tears, but the camera lingers longer now. Instead of inspiring sympathy, it invites scrutiny. Every pause, every word about safety or toxicity makes people wonder whom she's really protecting. Online, the tone flipped. Instead of debating whose side to take, viewers started talking about patterns of control. Kody, who once thrived on being the family spokesman, got suddenly cornered by the show footage. That's when the power dynamic turned. Not because of a big revelation, but because the story stopped serving a version he wanted to tell. And though Robyn avoided the public eye, she couldn't avoid public opinion. Her silence, once a shield, had become the loudest sound in the room. There is this moment when exhaustion turns into clarity. That is exactly what happened with Janelle. For years, she had been playing the role of a calm one, the mediator, the quiet planner, the voice that kept the family's chaos grounded. But by this point, she was done smoothing over everyone else's mess. You could hear it in her tone even before the confrontation started. Kody had been talking in circles for weeks. About fairness, about communication, about family unity. He'd call these conversations, but they always sounded like lectures. And Janelle, sitting across from him, just stared back with that tired half-smile. That said, "I've already had this fight in my head 1,000 times. Then came the question. The one that cracked it open. What happened to the money I gave you and Robyn for the house? The air changed. You could almost hear the hum of the cameras fade as if the crew themselves leaned in. Kody's expression flickered for a split second. He didn't have the answer ready. He tried to pivot, the way he always did. "It was family money," he said. "We were building a future for all of us." "But Janelle didn't blink. "Family money that I earned," she said. Her voice low, even controlled. Family money that you used to build a house I'll never live in. That line hit harder than any argument could. It wasn't a shout, it was a statement of record. Kody leaned forward, trying to recover the narrative. He brought up logistics, property, values, timelines, anything to make it sound reasonable, but it was too late. The story had already shifted for once. Janelle wasn't defending herself, she was holding him accountable. Robyn, of course, stayed quiet. She always did when the words got heavy. She sat next to Kody, hands folded in her lap, eyes soft, like she was watching a storm she hoped would pass. But that silence, it said everything. Janelle looked directly at her. "I supported you both because I believed in the dream," she said. "But that dream stopped being ours a long time ago." Robyn looked down, no tears this time, no trembling voice. Just stillness. It wasn't guilt. It was calculation. Kody shifted again, reaching for control. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under," he said. Janelle didn't respond, she didn't need to. The truth had landed, and for the first time in years, Kody couldn't talk his way out of it. That moment, quiet, brutal, final, wasn't just the collapse of a relationship, it was the end of the illusion that everyone was still playing the same game. The next day, Janelle packed up her things, not with anger, not with bitterness, just with clarity. The house, the money, the property, it all stayed behind. What she took with her was peace. After Janelle left, the energy in the Brown family shifted again. But this time, it wasn't chaos. It was control. Robyn saw the vacuum forming and filled it fast. She started talking about peace, about healing, about how everyone just needed space to process. On the surface, it sounded thoughtful, but underneath, it was strategy. Because if Robyn could frame the story before anyone else did, she could protect the version that kept her safe. On camera, her tone was calm, almost fragile. "I just can't handle all this tension," she said. "It's not good for me or the kids," classic reframing. While everyone else was reeling from Janelle's departure, Robyn quietly went back to work constructing her image. She was the wounded caretaker, the one who had to shield her children from negativity. Every scene, every comment designed to remind the audience that she was the fragile one. Meanwhile, Kody was almost echoing her language word for word. "We just want to be in a safe environment," he said. "Some of them don't want to move forward. That's how narratives lock in. Not through evidence, but repetition." But what Robyn didn't realize was that the viewers had evolved. The audience she was playing to now wasn't the same audience from 10 seasons ago. These were fans who remembered receipts, who could quote old episodes, who had watched her say one thing in 2012 and the opposite in 2023. Her control over the storyline was slipping. Then came the interviews, off-camera ones, online ones, where people close to the production started whispering. The same pattern emerged. When something messy happened, Robyn positioned herself as the victim. When a decision went wrong, she said she'd been pressured. When Kody lashed out, she said she was scared. It wasn't new behavior, it was just newly transparent. Meanwhile, Janelle was quiet, not defensive, not angry, just gone. And her silence spoke louder than Robyn's entire narrative. Because silence, when it comes from someone who has always been honest, sounds like the truth. And Robyn's words, no matter how gentle, started sounding like noise. The more Robyn tried to reframe what happened, the more obvious it became that she was protecting something. And it wasn't the family. And as the season unfolded, even Kody began to realize that the version of events Robyn was crafting didn't match his own memory. For the first time, there was tension between them. Small cracks at first, interrupted sentences, a glance that lingered too long, a disagreement about what was said and when. That was when it became clear, Robyn wasn't just protecting Kody anymore, she was protecting herself. By the time the cameras rolled for the next family meeting, Kody looked different. Not physically, emotionally. He had that restless, sharp energy of someone who is used to being listened to but no longer is. His voice was loud, his hands were moving, but no one was buying what he was selling anymore. Even Robyn's expression had changed. She wasn't nodding along the way she used to, she was distant, measured, watching him, not following him. Something had shifted. The man who once commanded every conversation was now performing for an audience that had already left the room. And deep down, he knew it. "I've been trying to fix this family for years," he said, "but some people just want to burn it all down." You could tell he wanted someone, Anyon, to challenge him. That was his comfort zone, conflict. As long as he could argue, he could still believe he was right, but there was no one left to argue with. Christine was gone. Janelle had walked away. Even Mary had stopped defending him. And Robyn, she was playing quiet again. Not supportive, not defensive. Just quiet. That silence was strategic. Because, for Robyn, silence had always been power. It made her look like the calm one, the reasonable one, the victim of everyone else's chaos. But this time, it wasn't working. Kody turned to her. "Say something," he snapped. "You were there, you saw what happened." Her response was soft, almost rehearsed. "I don't want to be in the middle anymore, Kody. It's too painful." He blinked, caught off guard. For the first time, Robyn wasn't cushioning his words or cleaning up his image. She was creating distance. That distance was new and dangerous. Because Kody's power had always depended on Robyn's support. She was his anchor, his last defender. Without her, he didn't have a family. He had fragments. The producers sensed it too. The edit started shifting. Scenes that once portrayed Kody as frustrated but well-meaning now showed him as erratic, emotional, and defensive. Viewers started using words like unhinged, desperate, exposed, and that word, exposed, became the theme of the season, because while Kody thought he was defending his truth, he was really revealing his fear. Fear of losing control, of being wrong, of realizing that maybe the man he thought he was never existed outside the story he'd been telling. Even Robyn seemed to sense it. Her soft looks weren't sympathy anymore, they were survival. She wasn't trying to protect him, she was trying to protect her position if he completely fell apart. It's ironic, really. The more Kody tried to save the image of their perfect unity, the more obvious it became that Robyn had started writing her own version of the story. And, for a man like Kody, losing control of the narrative was worse than losing the marriage, because if he wasn't the hero anymore, who was he? It started small. An awkward interview clip here, a defensive comment there. But then, it snowballed. Kody's unraveling wasn't just happening inside the family anymore. It was happening in public, on camera, in real time. Every time he tried to explain himself, he ended up exposing something else. An inconsistency, a contradiction, a quiet admission that didn't match the version of events fans already knew. The internet caught it instantly. Clips of Kody talking about family unity were being stitched side by side with older footage of him dismissing the wives who questioned him. Entire TikTok threads were dedicated to parsing his tone, his body language, the way his face shifted when someone said the word money. And that's when the tide really turned. For years, Kody had been the narrator of his own story now. The audience had taken that role away. They didn't need his explanations. They had the receipts. Even worse, Robyn wasn't defending him anymore. When a new episode dropped and the wives' interviews played back to back, you could see the distance. Kody would say one thing, and Robyn's reaction wouldn't match. There was no eye contact, no comforting hand on his shoulder, just that cool, measured tone. "I don't want to talk about the past," she said. "It's too painful, and I'm just trying to move forward." But the thing about refusing to talk about the past is that people start to wonder why. And in Robyn's case, that silence started to sound a lot like guilt. Fans noticed how she always seemed to step back when accountability came up. Every tough topic, money, property, promises, she'd label as negative energy or too toxic to revisit. It was a smart move on paper. Emotionally distance yourself. Stay calm, stay above it. But in practice, it just looked like evasion. Then came the breaking point. In one confessional, Kody admitted something that stopped everyone in their tracks. He was trying to sound noble, like a man making peace with hard choices. "I did what I had to do to protect my family," he said. "Some people will never understand that." The words hung there. Protect his family. From what? From who? The implication was enough to spark outrage. Fans began questioning if Kody was hinting at something deeper. Some hidden justification for how he and Robyn handled Janelle's money, or how they rationalized the emotional fallout that followed. Instead of controlling the damage, Kody had made it worse. Robyn stayed quiet during that episode. She didn't cry. She didn't correct him. She didn't even look at him. And that was the real tell. Because when Robyn stops trying to fix Kody's narrative, it means she is rewriting her own. By the end of that week, online conversations had flipped completely. Kody wasn't the misunderstood husband anymore. He was the unreliable narrator, the man who built his life on a story that was finally falling apart. And Robyn, she wasn't innocent. She was strategic. But strategy only works when people still believe in your sincerity. Now even that was beginning to fade. It happened quietly. No yelling, no big argument. Just one of those long, uncomfortable pauses that tell you something's about to break. Robyn sat across from the producer. The lights were softer than they usually were, the kind of setup made for personal reflection. You could tell she was tired. Her eyes were swollen, her voice lower than normal, but this wasn't her usual tears. This wasn't the sad but strong Robyn the show had built. This was something else. Something raw. "I feel like everyone hates me now," she said. "Like everything I do is wrong." The words sounded genuine, but the timing didn't. It came right after an episode where fans had torn apart her comments about toxic energy. Online, she was trending for all the wrong reasons. Still, in that moment, you almost felt sorry for her, until she kept talking. "I tried to protect Kody. I tried to protect the family, but they just turned on me." Protect. That word again, the same one Kody had used, the one that made everything sound noble and self-sacrificing, even when it wasn't. Except this time, she didn't stop there. "Janelle made her choices," Robyn said softly. "She wanted to be independent. I didn't make her leave." And that's when the mask slipped, because Robyn wasn't defending herself anymore. She was rewriting history in real time, turning Janelle's escape into a selfish decision instead of a survival move. The internet caught it instantly. Clips of her statement went viral, spliced next to old footage of Robyn begging for sisterhood and togetherness. The contrast was brutal. Commenters aren't buying the victim act anymore. They saw what was happening. Robyn was deflecting blame before the fallout landed. Meanwhile, inside the family, word spread fast. Christine texted Janelle, warning her about what Robyn said in her confessional. Janelle's response was short. Of course she did. You could tell Janelle wasn't surprised. She'd expected it. That was the thing about people who manipulate with kindness. They always tell the story that makes them look pure. But now, Robyn was running out of stories. In later scenes, her composure cracked. You could see the tension around her eyes, the nervous hands fidgeting with her necklace. When the producer asked her what she regretted most, she hesitated for the first time all season. "Maybe trusting too much," she said. "Believing everyone wanted what I wanted." It sounded poetic, but empty, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. For a split second, she looked straight at the camera as if realizing the audience no longer saw her the way she wanted. That's when the tears came. Not the gentle, controlled ones from before, but the kind that happen when someone realizes the narrative slipping away for good. For years, Robyn had been the emotional center of the story, the heart, the balance, the misunderstood wife. But now she was exposed, not because someone attacked her, because finally the truth spoke louder than her version of it. The family meeting stopped. The texts slowed down. The calls went unanswered. By now, Kody wasn't just losing his wives. He was losing the narrative that had once defined him. He used to say things like, "I'm the head of this family," with confidence. Now it sounded hollow. The cameras captured him pacing, rambling to himself, trying to piece together a version of the truth that still made sense. "They don't see everything I do for them," he said. "They never did." But the truth was, no one was listening anymore. Even Robyn, his last ally, had grown quiet. She stayed in the background, tending to her kids, avoiding tough conversations. You could see the distance now, not physical, but emotional. It was like she'd built a wall between them to protect what little peace she had left. In the next episode, the crew followed Kody around his property, cameras catching long silences between his words. He looked like a man talking to ghosts. "This was supposed to be our dream," he said, pointing toward the empty stretch of Coyote Pass. "We were going to build something lasting here." The camera panned to the empty land. No construction, no plans, just quiet. The dream was literally gone. That's when the producers asked him a question that made him freeze mid-sentence. "Do you think Robyn still believes in that dream?" He froze. You could see him swallow hard, jaw clenching before he said anything. "Of course she does," he said quickly. "We both do." But his tone gave him away, because in that moment everyone watching knew. Robyn didn't believe anymore. Not in the family, not in the vision, not even in him. She was surviving, not building. The next few scenes were brutal. Kody tried to talk to Robyn about reconnecting with the other wives, hoping maybe that could fix his image. Or at least his conscience. She shook her head. "I can't keep being the go-between," she said. "It's destroying me." Kody leaned forward, pleading. "We have to make this work. You and me, at least us." But Robyn didn't respond. She just sat there, eyes glassy, staring past him. It was the first time Kody looked genuinely afraid, not angry, not defensive, but scared. Because if Robyn stopped fighting for him, who would? The man who'd built a family around control now had none. The wives he once guided had outgrown him, the audience he once convinced had turned against him, and the partner he believed would never leave him had started emotionally checking out. When the episode ended, he stood outside, hands in his pockets, watching the sunset over the land that was supposed to unite them. It wasn't just property anymore. It was proof of everything he'd lost trying to hold on to control. And for the first time in years, Kody Brown looked small. Not the patriarch, not the provider. Just a man alone in his own story. It started with whispers. Little hints that Robyn had been talking to producers off, Chimera scheduling her own interviews, setting boundaries about what she would and wouldn't discuss. At first, it seemed like damage control, then the rumors hit. Robyn was negotiating her own future. Kody didn't see it coming. He'd been too focused on defending himself, trying to spin his image as the misunderstood husband who'd been abandoned. He thought Robyn was still his ally, still in his corner. He thought wrong. Her tone had changed again. Not tearful this time, measured professional. "I think people need to hear my side," she told the crew. "There are things that have been misunderstood." It was the same line she'd used for years, but this time it sounded like an exit strategy. When the episode aired, it felt different from the rest. The music was quieter, the pacing slower. Robyn's face filled the frame as she took a deep breath. When Janelle left, it broke something in Kody, she said. He wasn't the same after that. "I tried to hold it together, but you can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed." That line hit like a confession. For years, she'd shielded him, explaining his anger, softening his words, turning every argument into a misunderstanding. Now, she was separating herself from him in real time. "I still care about him," she continued, "but I have to think about what's healthy for my family." For me, healthy, that word landed heavy. It was the same word the other wives had used before they left. Kody watched the episode alone. You could tell he hadn't been warned about what she'd said. He looked stunned. Like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. "She blindsided me," he muttered in his next confessional. "After everything we've been through, she blindsided me. But here's the truth. It wasn't blindsiding. It was inevitable." Robyn had built her life around Kody's version of control, but when that control crumbled, she did what she's always done, protected herself. She'd seen what happened to Christine, to Janelle, to Mary. She wasn't going to be the last one standing beside a sinking ship. Fans caught it immediately. Comments flooded in. "Robyn's playing the long game. She's rewriting her image again. She's prepping for her solo narrative." And they were right, because within a week, Robyn had a new storyline about self-reflection, motherhood, and resilience. She wasn't the villain anymore. She was the survivor. Meanwhile, Kody was left with fragments, old clips of himself yelling, screenshots of interviews he couldn't take back, and a reputation that no longer fit the man he wanted to be. He had tried to push back online, posting half-hearted defenses about editing and context, but it was too late. The story had already been written, and this time, not by him. Robyn had made her move, quietly, strategically, and completely on her terms. And for the first time in their shared history, Kody wasn't the one setting the narrative, he was the one reacting to it. The tables had turned. The final chapter didn't come with fireworks, it came with silence. The kind that follows when a story has finally told itself. Months had passed since Robyn's solo interviews changed everything. The show's tone had shifted. No longer a family drama, it had become a post-mortem. A quiet study of what happens when control, love, and loyalty fracture beyond repair. Kody looks older now. The energy, the bravado, it was gone. His hair grayer, his movements slower, his voice quieter. When he spoke, it wasn't to defend himself anymore. It was to make sense of what was left. "I used to think I was the one holding this family together," he said. "Now I realize I was the one pulling it apart." It was the first honest thing he'd said in a long time. He sat on the edge of that same empty stretch of Coyote Pass, the dreamland that had become his biggest symbol of failure. No houses, no laughter, just open space and a man trying to make peace with it. Meanwhile, the women had moved on. Christine was happy, finally remarried. Janelle was thriving, working, traveling, living life on her terms. Even Mary, after years of being stuck in the background, had found a version of freedom that didn't require Kody's approval. And Robyn, she'd gone quiet again. But this time it was different. There were no tears, no explanations, no emotional pleas. She wasn't hiding, she was watching. Some said she and Kody had separated. Others claimed they were still together, just living separate emotional lives. The truth was murky, but one thing was clear. The power dynamic that once defined them was gone. When the reunion special aired, the energy was strange, tender but heavy. The host asked each of them what they'd learned. Christine spoke about strength. Janelle talked about peace, Mary about acceptance, and when it was Robyn's turn, she hesitated. "I thought holding on made me loyal," she said softly. "But sometimes holding on just makes you stuck." Even Kody nodded at that. For once, there was no debate, no lecture, no justification, just silence. A shared understanding that the family they'd built had collapsed under the weight of its own expectations. As the credits rolled, the cameras lingered on Kody one last time. He looked at the land again, hands in his pockets, wind blowing across the field. "Maybe this was never meant to be a story about forever," he said quietly. "Maybe it was just about learning who we really are." The screen faded to black. It was poetic in a way, the man who'd built his world on control, finally learning to sit with loss. The wives who'd lived under his authority found freedom. And Robyn, the woman once painted as the villain, standing in the gray area between love and survival. The audience had watched every rise and fall, every tear, every argument. But this ending wasn't about blame anymore. It was about truth. Messy, complicated, human truth. Because in the end, the sister wives story wasn't about marriage or religion or television. It was about people trying and failing to love within limits that could never hold. And sometimes that's the most honest ending of all.